I like flashbacks. Flashbacks are often used in stories to help the audience better understand the world and the characters within it. Within the medium of anime, flashbacks have kind of become notorious for having a certain style. You know, you're in the middle of a fight and all of a sudden you're about to lose your life, and then you think back to when you was a little kid and your freaking master taught you how to unleash your power, and all of a sudden, like, there are a lot of anime that utilize that storytelling feature of flashbacks. But a lot of the time, these flashbacks are often very small moments within the larger story. It's like a chapter or an episode or even a small part of an episode or a chapter meant to kind of go back, tell us a story, and then take us back to the present quickly. But one of my favorite uses of this flashback technique has to be the backstory arc, bruh. A backstory arc is when an anime actually takes the time to pause the main story and take us way back to stuff that happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whenever. Taken back to the past, not just for one episode, not just for a few seconds, not just to give the characters motivation to win a fight, but to actually tell an entirely different story within the same world of the show. You can see a really cool example of this in one of my favorite arcs of Jujutsu Kaisen, the hidden inventory arc at the beginning of season 2. Within this arc, we follow a young Satoru Gojo years before the main events of the story take place. We get to see who he actually is at this point in time and how he slowly turned into the person that we see in season 1 of the story. In season 1, Gojo is introduced as this silly, goofy mentor figure who's leagues ahead of everybody else in the verse when it comes to power. He's described as this unstoppable force. We see many times in the story where he pulls insane feats that damn near no one else in the story could do. And you kind of get this sense that he is untouchable, that whenever he does show up on screen, he's probably gonna handle whatever's gonna happen. It makes you really wonder, like, does he even have any weaknesses? When we get back to the beginning of season 2, we see a younger version of Gojo who's way more immature, way more reckless, and way more egotistical. I particularly really love the opening and endings for this arc so freaking much, bro. It really lets us dive deep into the world of the past in this arc. See Gojo and Gato and Shoko just hanging out, doing stupid shit together, like just hanging out like real friends do in your teenage years, and it gives this sense of just connectedness, of memories. Makes you think back to a time in your life way back in the past that you may not have been in for so long, but still that nostalgic factor to it, I think. I feel like this arc does a really good job at going against the status quo of what is established in season 1 of Gojo being this untouchable figure. Can't get to him, nobody can touch him, by contrasting this with a younger version of him that is very malleable, showing that if you do plan enough and if you do catch him off guard, you can hurt him, you can get to him, you can get to his emotions. Like, he is a human being too. And I feel like this arc really hammers that home, that Gojo, just like everybody else in the story, is just another human being just like everybody else. I feel like what we see happen to him after this arc would not hit hard nearly as much if we didn't take the time to actually live in this past world. Actually seeing the bonds that Gojo used to have, watching him lose them, and watching him go through all this loss in such a short period of time makes moments like this so much more understandable as to why he would get caught off guard by that. If we were to skip this arc entirely and still play that same event, it wouldn't hit nearly as hard. This is one of the moments where I think actually extending a flashback does really well for the story as a whole, as we're meant to sit with this and we're meant to be in that same mindset that Gojo is in this moment. We're meant to feel that same weight and that same sense of confusion that he does in this moment when he's caught off guard. It makes all the more sense that of all the things to trip up the unstoppable, untouchable, invincible Gojo is the one thing that ties back to who he is as a person. Another great example of a beautiful backstory arc comes from the anime and manga Bungo Stray Dog. If you haven't heard like what this show is, best way to explain it is it's like mafia, like warfare, but they just got superpowers. That's it. It's just different gangs, different groups fighting each other. In this show, there's a pivotal character named Dazai. In season 1 of the show, Dazai is presented as that same kind of mentor slash teacher figure for most of the main cast of our heroes in this show. Kind of gives that same kind of feeling of like, oh well, if Dazai's here, you know, we might be all right, you know. The main antagonistic force of season 1 is this like mafia gang called the Port Mafia. You know, kind of on the nose there. Our main group of heroes fight against them for most of this entire season. Throughout this fight, we get a lot of insights about Dazai and his potential past with the Port Mafia themselves. I think it's really interesting that they introduce him first as this mentor figure for the main characters to kind of give him this like good feeling of like, oh, like this is someone we can rely on. And as you watch a lot of these fights in the first season, it really just makes you wonder, like, why did Dazai even join in the first place? What was his actual history with them, and what made him leave in the end? Bungo Stray Dogs season 2 begins much like the beginning of JJK season 2. We step back, answer all the questions that season 1 made you ask about this pivotal character. Within the Dark Era arc, we get to look at Dazai's past within the Port Mafia and see the people that he was connecting with, the types of missions he was going on, and ultimately what made him choose to leave. Seeing that shift from Dazai being deeply intertwined with the antagonist of this story to him going through his own forms of loss and tragedy that influence him to make the decision to leave, it makes all of the conflicts that happen later on in season 2 much more interesting, as we took that time to look back and see who Dazai actually was when he was with the ops, when he was with the enemy team. And it just makes their future interactions with members of the team so much more interesting later on in the season. In a lot of popular media, stories often start off with some sort of inciting event. It's always something that happens that kicks off the story and makes it so that everything else can happen after that. But in reality, our stories often start when we're born. There are so many different eras of our lives that we go through where we experience things that influence the next era. Sometimes we don't even think about it. Sometimes we barely remember it, and sometimes we have moments where we go through something in the present that makes us think of the past. To think back on those different eras of who we used to be, different ages, different past. Sometimes there's times where I look at old pictures of myself from middle school or when I was younger, before I got the glasses, before I got the freaking mustache, all this. I look at those old pictures of myself and I sometimes feel like I'm looking at a stranger. I don't know who that is. I don't know who I'm looking at. And yet despite that, I still have so many memories of those times and all the decisions I made, all the events I experienced, and everything that made me who I am today. I think it's really important to look back on those eras of our lives every now and then, to remember what they taught us, to remember how they influenced us, to help understand ourselves a bit better. I think that's why I really love backstory arcs in anime so much, because it kind of mirrors that same feeling of like looking back at that point in your life, looking back at that era. I think it'd be really cool to see more backstory arcs like this in anime that aren't just a flashback or a few minutes or an episode, but a whole arc. I understand why a lot of authors don't lean into that as much and opt to just making the backstory something short. People can lose interest if you don't make that backstory about characters that they already cared about, or they already had these questions about, or that you already set up to have questions about that character. But I don't know. I'm just yapping, y'all. I'm just yapping. Do y'all have any favorite backstory arcs in anime or any kind of media that you love? Put them down below. Listen, I'll be reading the comments, bro. Listen, that's all I wanted to talk about today, y'all. So stay safe, eat well, take care of your minds, and take care of your souls, y'all. And remember to be kind. I'm gonna get out of here. Peace.
挙式紫領域展開